Honestly, before we even start this video, what the hell does her immigration status have to do with anything? For individuals on social media and the mainstream media to write stories making the statement that she was a legal immigrant is absolutely ridiculous and absurd. Would any of this have changed if she was an illegal immigrant? Would any of this have changed if her status was different? How does that change the story? How does that change what happened? She was a human being. Whether she's here legally or not is irrelevant. What happened to her was horrific. And people trying to fan some sort of racial flame just to get a view is sick. It's disturbing. And I think the vast majority of us have had enough of it. The vast majority of us are sick of it. Her immigration status has nothing to do with this. It has no place in the conversation, and neither do you. But there is a lot of blame to go around. And there are a lot of people pointing a lot of fingers in a lot of directions. So who's right, who's wrong, and what could we do different? All that being said, everything's alleged. Welcome to the point. Let's get to it. First, let's talk about Decarlos Brown. There was a GoFundMe that was started. Now, it's been taken down by GoFundMe, and in a lot of ways, it was sick. They did have one thing right on it, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but let's go over this guy's criminal history, just so we know where to start from. In 2011 and onwards, he had dozens of charges, including felony larceny, armed robbery, and communicating threats. Between 2015 and 2020, he served 5 years in prison for armed robbery. In 2020, months after his release, he was arrested for attacking his own sister. In January of 2024, charged with misusing the 911 system after a bizarre episode where he claimed a man-made material inside his body was controlling his actions, at least according to the Charlotte Observer. Now, it goes without saying, and it's obvious, he did need help, he was suffering. And everybody has a natural inclination to blame the judge in this situation. We're going to get to that in a second, because this doesn't fall squarely on her shoulders, and it's just not as simple as incarcerating an individual before they're found guilty of a crime. But the part of the conversation worth talking about is this qualification to be a magistrate judge.
I'm fixing to commensurate this trial here. We gonna see if we can come up with a verdict up in here.
Now, in Mecklenburg, where this incident took place, no, you do not have to be a lawyer and have a law degree to be a judge. That's been widely reported on and true by everything I was able to read. You just have to have experience within the court system. Now, in some jurisdictions, magistrates are elected by the local population, but in this situation, the judge is appointed. And there is something to be said about these magistrate judges who walk around town thinking they rule the world. There is something to be said about a magistrate judge who is consistently making bad decisions or consistently making biased decisions. I mean, just because somebody is light or happens to have the administration experience of a clerk of court, it doesn't give them the right to rule over everybody. It doesn't give them the right to control lives and dictate the outcome of an individual situation. I mean, when you look at stories like that situation going on in Kentucky right now is a whole nother story with a wild set of allegations. We can see as a society there is a problem. There is a problem in our judicial system. Now, it's not completely corrupt. It doesn't need to be completely dismantled, but maybe it is time to focus on solution-based conversation. What can we do to ensure these judges are better qualified? What can we do to ensure we're putting the right people in these positions so they make the ruling and decision just based off the law, just based off the situation? They don't have a personal bias. They don't have a dog in the fight. That is the point of a judge. I mean, we got enough of these cows walking around ruining lives. We don't need to continue this moving forward. Maybe the individual who needs to be the magistrate judge is somebody with a law degree. How dare you, sir? And has an understanding of what the law is and isn't, and has an understanding of what we can and can't do. Now, the role of a judge is limited. Everybody needs to understand that. Simply because you are a judge and you're sitting behind a bench, it doesn't mean you get to make up the law. We know it has happened.
Dozens, if not hundreds. It's so many I can't tell you.
But when it has happened in those situations, it is overturned. It is corrected. Now, there is a process. It's a slow process. It's a painful process.
I've waited years. Many years.
But the process does occur. The one thing I do know for sure is Iryna was here as a refugee. Everything she was going through in her home country forced her to leave. And I get it. She came over here. She was trying to do her American dream. She was working jobs. She was doing things to better herself and her family. And what happened to her was absolutely unnecessary. She didn't deserve it. Individuals making statements and videos saying, hey, look, there were minorities on this train. They didn't help her. Decarlos didn't attack them. So clearly this had a racial component. It's stupid. It's absurd. We don't know what we don't know. None of us are psychic. I can say a lot of those people just look absolutely shocked. They had no idea what was going on. Honestly, Iryna didn't look like she knew what was going on. She just knew something had happened to her. I don't feel like she was aware of what exactly happened before she started to pass out. It's sad, it's tragic. This shouldn't have happened and it should have never happened. And a lot of people are laying the blame at Judge Stokes' feet. And she does bear some of this blame. Because a lot of people will never waste a political opportunity. As of right now, several North Carolina lawmakers are asking for Judge Stokes to be removed from the bench. They're saying if she would have did her job and did her job right, Decarlos Brown would have never been set free. Iryna would have been alive. So the blame squarely falls on her. My only counterpoint to that, my only pushback is this. If you're a lawmaker, change the laws. Obviously, we know we have holes in the system. A lot of y'all are lawyers. You're fully aware of the holes. We know you're aware of the holes because you exploit the holes. So when individuals in your state elect you to office, fix the holes and errors in the system. I mean, a lot of people just wait for a tragedy to jump on it and get political points. I'm not saying that's what they're doing here. I'm not pointing that finger. I'm not one of these people who are going to inflame individuals on some sort of political policy.
No, I want one of those.
What I am saying is there are problems in systems. There are problems in systems all throughout this country, and our lawmakers need to fix the problems in those systems. We don't need to wait for a tragedy to happen before we do something about this tragedy. We can be a little bit more proactive in our decision making. In a letter to the Chief Judge of North Carolina Judicial District 26, Roy H. Wiggins, 10 Republicans question Stokes, a magistrate judge for the Charlotte District in Mecklenburg County Court, North Carolina, over her decision to release Brown in a case earlier this year. They said this decision gave good grounds for removal, which they'll need to do some investigating, they'll need to do some digging, and they'll need to figure out if this is true or not. And I'm as fair and honest as I could be on this channel, and to be fair, that's what I originally thought as well. But unlike a lot of people on social media, I look for a differing opinion. I look for somebody to say something that would go against my initial thought of this is all the judge's fault. She's the one to blame. She needs to have jail time. She needs to be thrown off the bench. She needs to be tarred and feathered, all this crazy stuff. And I did find another interesting article in Newsweek. And that article in Newsweek raised a lot of good counterpoints. Because it's not as simple as this is all the judge's fault. In fact, listen to this and then we'll talk about a solution. In January 2025, Brown was arrested for alleged misuse of the 911 system and was released after signing a written promise to appear at his next court hearing. This is a tragic failure on several levels. Matthew Mangino, a former district attorney in Lawrence County, Pennsylvania, told Newsweek, Judge Stokes is responsible for making bail decisions. The standard is, will the accused appear before future proceedings? And is the accused a threat to the public? It would appear Decarlos Brown Jr. had a history of violent criminal conduct. The unseen failure is the dismantling of community mental health care. Brown has mental health problems. Was he receiving mental health treatment while he was on the street? Unfortunately for some former offenders, the only place they receive mental health care is in jail or prison, he continued. Should a judge send someone accused of a crime to jail simply because they are mentally ill? That's a valid question that's certainly worth talking about, and the answer is no, depending on external factors. Attorney Bradley P. Moss told Newsweek, living in a free society where innocence is presumed until guilt is proven.
But y'all don't say that.
Shut up.
And courts assess the criminal allegation in front of them. There are unfortunate and sometimes tragic situations that can result. Even assuming the career criminal description of Decarlos Brown is accurate, the magistrate judge cannot simply hold someone in pretrial detention for the fun of it. The magistrate had to consider the specific crime at issue, misuse of the 911 system, past convictions, which appeared to have been more than 10 years earlier, feasibility of even a cash bond, and other related factors. Hindsight is 2020 and maybe requiring completion of the competency evaluation prior to release would have been the better course of action.
You're a damn genius. That's the most outstanding answer I've ever heard.
But it is not widely outside the realm of legal procedure for this mistake to have occurred. Fear-mongering and politicizing this tragedy will not solve nor bring back Iryna Zarutska. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. I got a Southeast education. I can't hardly read to begin with.
I'm learning.
But we can see here it's not as simple as she needs to go, this is all her fault. There's a process, there's a procedure, and it seems like maybe she was following the procedure. Or maybe she was following the procedure to the best of her ability. Yes, some of the blame lays on her, but that once again is a hindsight is 2020 conversation. But it's obvious who failed here. And it's obvious who all was failed. Iryna was failed by the system. Decarlos Brown was failed by the system. Now, he's not innocent of this crimes. This doesn't exonerate him. He'll have his day in court. I'm not trying to say he's guilty, but his mental issues in the past don't absolve him from what happened right now. People need help. They're looking for help. The problem is we don't have a good healthcare system for that type of health in this country, and it's crazy. It's absolutely absurd to me the amount of money we'll spend in the healthcare field in this country, but we leave this part of healthcare relatively untouched. We're so far behind in treatment. I mean, the best thing we can get treatment-wise right now is you got to pay out of pocket for a really good therapist, and all the psychiatrists want to do is dope you up on this medicine and that medicine. It's stupid. It doesn't help anything. We do have an issue, and that issue needs to be addressed. It's sad that most people will have access to healthcare when they arrive in a jail and a prison. And what's really bad is in rural America, you can't find anybody who's qualified or trained to handle this. So once again, we have issues and holes in the system, and that system is put there for the people to help the people, and it's just not available. And if it is available, it's not readily available, or you got to have a lot of money because insurance isn't going to cover the cost of a lot of this. Now, we could help more people if we have more facilities, and those facilities could be funded by the taxpayer. But that's a separate conversation, and it's a deep conversation, and it requires a lot more thought than what we're going to get into in this particular video. Once again, I'm not saying he's not responsible for these particular crimes. I'm saying there are aspects of this conversation that did fail him. And this doesn't fall solely on the judge either. I'm sorry, that's just how I see it. Now, is she 100% innocent? Is she 100% clean? No, some of the blame does lay on her. She had a decision to make, and in this particular decision, it seems like she made the bad one. Because in the past, he did have some failure to appears. He did have some bench warrants put out for failure to appear. So he wasn't always going to show up to his next court date. And obviously, if you're being booked and charged for armed robbery, you had just attacked a family member, then you are a problem to the general public. So those things should have been considered better, if they were considered at all. But the system failed Iryna as well. We have a massive understaffing of individuals in our public transportation system. You see, Decarlos shouldn't even have been on that system because he didn't pay for anything. And if you're running a city or trying to operate a city and you have a massive shortage in a particular area, you need to examine why you have that massive shortage. Do you have crappy leadership and leadership is driving away all the employees? Are you grossly underpaying those employees? Or are you paying them appropriately, but those employees were running into situations they weren't trained for because you lacked the money and the budget to provide the proper training? There's all sorts of solutions here. And the finger doesn't go towards one individual. It goes toward all individuals. Everybody within that state, if they would have been a little more proactive, could have done something differently to prevent this situation from happening. But nobody did in this situation. And because it hit the social media and because it hit mainstream media, everybody wants to jump out of the woodwork and try to be some sort of white knight in this particular story. And it's crazy and sick, in my own unprofessional opinion. And yes, these are all just opinions. This is simply an open discussion channel. But it's a real good time for everybody to look in the mirror of the state they're living in and see what can they do different. What can they do to prevent something like this from happening in the future? You can't prevent them all, but we can certainly do better. We have a lot of holes, we have a lot of issues, we have a lot of problems that are going to require individuals to come together and talk. They're going to require people from opposite political parties to sit down and have a conversation it seems like nobody wants to have. But once again, this view-based, click-driven news coverage of this story is serving no purpose. It's not helping anybody. Flaming some sort of racial flame in this particular story isn't helping anybody. Decarlos Brown had issues. What happened to Iryna didn't deserve to happen. Let's don't turn this into something it's not. I understand there's reports of what he said on that train after he attacked Iryna. I get that, but let's also consider something. He has issues. He has problems. He also said that the man-made stuff in his body made him do that. He's also said she was reading his mind. So are we going to take everything he says as if it's scripture, as if it's truth? Let's have a little bit of perspective. Let's have a little bit of patience. Let's have a little bit of understanding. What happened in Charlotte was sickening, and it didn't have to happen. But if you enjoy this and a more fair, open conversation, maybe check one of these videos out. Y'all be safe now.